by Tsum. But another way to think of Tsum is a psychological reading of Tsum, that we also have to leave room. We shouldn't let our ego fill up all of the space. Let's say you're encountering another person in a relationship, in a marriage, or especially a parent and a child. If the parent overwhelms the child with his or her own ego, with his or her own agenda, there's not room for the child to grow. So a parent should practice Tsum. A parent should contract a little. A parent should withdraw a little bit to let the child learn, to let the child stumble. And that's the only way for really healthy growth to take place.
Don has a point, and he says, is God now fully contracted? And I guess maybe the question would be, going back to the question I posed earlier, did God create this one-time light, then retract under Kabbalistic theology, and then contract to make space and allow for humanity? Or is God not fully contracted and then still interacting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you could apply this psychological understanding of Tsum to God and the human being as well. How do we have a self? If there's a divine light within us, aren't we all just part of God? Why are we different people? Why are we on different schedules? Why do we have to do all this preparation to have a Zoom meeting and see each other? Why don't we just all melt into the divine oneness? How can there be God and separate creation? So one explanation is that God withdraws and lets us think that we are separate. Each of us thinks that we really are separate. The fact that we can think that we are separate, that's evidence of God's withdrawal. We think that we exist apart from God, but we really are expressing that divine energy in a unique way. So without Tsum, without that contraction or withdrawal, everything would just be one glob of being. And perhaps it's more interesting for God to arrange the world so that each of us exists, each of us seems to be separate, and then occasionally we discover that we're not so totally separate. Right? Einstein says the goal of religion is to realize that you're part of something greater. So that awareness that we're part of something greater is a way to overcome the Tsum, a way to overcome the separation between God and reality, between God and human reality.
I see why people study Kabbalah at night, by the way, because if you do this at 12:30 in the afternoon, it kind of takes your mind away for the rest of your day. You have to go back to mundane work.
Yeah, let's look at some questions other than Tsum. Tsum is fascinating, and people can look at it more. But let's see if there are other questions more generally about Kabbalah or about other things that have come up. I'm willing to let's try one raised hand. I like seeing a person's face. So,
okay, well, Lisa had her hand up for a while, so let's unmute. Okay, Lisa, you are unmuted.
So earlier you were talking about that the light was first divine by God, but that now that light, that God is no longer a part of that light. And I was always thinking that God is recreating the world every second, and that in Od Bilvado, that everything is God. And certainly we are separate. I mean, we think we're separate, but in terms of like having a relationship with God and God wanting a relationship with humans, I don't have any text to back this up, although certain rabbis I followed have spoken about this, but that we're in a relationship with God every second. We just don't realize that.
Yeah, no, I didn't say that God is separate from the light. I didn't mean to say that. I think the light is divine light, and yet somehow one spark of that light is hidden within each of us. You could say that's the soul. And the spiritual journey is to fan that spark into a flame, to become aware of our relationship with that light within, and finally to discover that what's deep within is not separate from the beyond. You could say that the beyond within, we're trying to find that beyond within. If we can find the beyond within, then we overcome the separation. And I think what you said is very true. It's a matter of awareness. Okay, are we separate from God, or are we connected with God? It comes down to awareness. Right, the Hebrew term is da'at. Right, da'at is often translated knowledge, but the word da'at in the Hasidic text really is better translated awareness. So the challenge is to become aware that we have a bit of God within. That each of us is one fraction of the infinite. Right, and actually a mathematician would tell you that a fraction of infinity is infinite. Right, that sounds strange, but if a fraction of infinity, if it weren't infinite, then you could figure out how big infinity is. You have this fraction and that fraction, you add up all the fractions, you get infinity. But no, even a fraction of infinity is infinite. So we share in the infinite nature of God. Something within us is also infinite. And spirituality is focusing on that infinite light more and more, and overcoming whatever temporary separation there is. You could say the separation is necessary to a certain extent. Otherwise, we could melt into the divine or disappear or die. So there's a rhythm, again, of concealing and revealing. It's like with relationship, as you mentioned, relationship, right? You have a relationship with a loved one, with a spouse. Okay, your husband or your wife, you're so close to that person, you bear yourself to that other person physically and spiritually and psychologically, emotionally. But there are times at which you keep yourself separate, you keep yourself hidden. But a healthy relationship is balancing the hiding and the revealing. I think that's true in terms of interpersonal relationships, and it's true in terms of the relationship with God.
Let's give Florence a chance. She's had her hand up as well for a while.
I'm quite interested in the way in which the Zohar or Zoharic thought seems to have moved away from the Midrashic attention to Adam and Adam's role in all of this. It was almost as if Adam had some kind of special closeness to God, special deification, and if we just take what you've laid out for us, the Zohar is not so much interested in Adam.
And where do you see the Zohar's interest going? From Adam?
Well, it seems to be going into the light, and the darkness, and sort of skipping. I mean, I'm just taking this from what you laid out for us.
I mean, Adam is still important to the Zohar, but I think what is true is that the Zohar isn't so much interested in ancient history or just in what happened, 5,000 years ago or 13 billion years ago. The Zohar wants to apply it to our life. It wants us to become a spiritual reality for us now. So don't just stay with the biblical characters. Don't just stay with the biblical heroes. See how you yourself can become a hero, right? See how can you establish your own relationship with God, learning from the Torah, but not just studying the past, right? Delving into the eternal present, right? That eternal present is so important in Kabbalah. And Adam, now becomes a symbol for all of humanity, and God is even pictured, right, taking on human attributes, right? Maimonides wants to avoid that totally. The Zohar says no. We can imagine who God is. Our imagination won't be fully accurate, but without imagination, we have no approach to God. So the Zohar celebrates the human imagination, but it wants most of all to inspire us to contact that light. You could say that to contact our original Adam and Eve nature, right? What's called primordial Adam. Within each of us is a bit of Adam and Eve. But focus on your own opportunity to live out that light, to express that light in a creative way.
We have time for one more question. Barry's been waiting patiently. So Barry, here you go.
Yes. I have a thought. if God created the world and there's unity and unity in God's mind, then everything should go according to God's mind, and there should be no sin. So in order for us to have free will, in order for us to sin, God's unity has to be removed from the world. So I think this explains how we can have such things as sin, how we can have such things as free will.
Yeah, that's why it takes us back to Tzimtzum, one understanding of God's withdrawal, right? God withdraws and allows us to be, allows us to express free will or to think we have free will, and we work out of that consciousness, we work out of that awareness. Occasionally we get a sense that we're not so separate, that God hasn't withdrawn as much as we think. But I think you're right, to connect the individual sense of self with free will, that is the product of God stepping back. God steps back so that we can stumble, so that we can learn and stumble. You know, the Hebrew word for sin, the root of that word, chata, also means to miss the mark, as in archery. Right? If you miss the mark, that root is how you describe that in Hebrew, lahachati, from that root chata. So you could say sin is losing focus. Sin is really, I think, basically selfishness, right? It's becoming so enamored of the self that you grab everything you possibly can get, that you think only of your own needs, your own gratifications. So selfishness leads to
Dr. John, this is my morning meditation, Dr. John. I know you want a free consultation and you want to get you want to make some dopamine, but you know, I mean, what do you want to talk about, Dr. John? Like,
the I am thou relationship. If you relate to another person,
you need consultation.
You're becoming
all right, this video has only 4 more minutes. If you make it to the end, 4 more minutes, you get a free consultation for just a quick 10 minutes.
To a certain degree, that isolation of separate identity.
Plus, I gotta leave and get to my boat and meet a beautiful girl who just got her nails done. She's got some grippers, and you know what that means?
Yes, paradox. Paradox is a real embarrassment in certain systems of thought, and in mysticism, paradox is really
the girl of my nightmare.
Logic. Some thinkers have called it that. Paradox is mystical logic that unless
you have doubts
and its opposite are both brought into the picture, there's something incomplete. The Zohar revels in paradox, right? As we saw with Cordovero, if it's not concealed, it can't be revealed, right? If it's totally revealed, you're no longer there to appreciate it. You would be blown away. So there has to be concealment in order to have revelation. There has to be withdrawal in order for creation to come about. But we don't want to stay totally in that separate mode. So spirituality is trying to overcome that gap, trying to combine the opposites, trying to find a harmony between opposites.
Harmony, John. Harmony.
Great discussion. I think we're about out of time, unless you have something else you wanted to add. I do think a great T-shirt, if it's not concealed, it can't be revealed. Maybe we could sell that. And also, we do have, it's scary, folks, but, Rosh Hashanah is coming up, and then we get to, Simchat Torah, and then we start reading the Torah again. So you're going to get to this reading when you get to Shul and you start reading creation of the world. You get to this line about creating light. This is all going to come back to you. So I will share the notes. You can bring it to synagogue with you and wow your friends and confuse them as well.
Good. Yeah. My Zohar course, you'll find out about a good number of you are in it. Some of you know about it, and Ari will send out a description. We're taking a break now until after all the Chagim. The next series in our weekly Zohar course on Zoom will be the beginning of October, and you can find out more about that. Ari sends out the description.
Yeah, I will send whatever you share with me. What are we going to learn about next week?
Next week we're going to focus on dreams, on the meaning of dreams, not so much in a general sense. We're going to look at a more extended passage from the Zohar about Joseph's dreams. So we'll use that as our starting point.
Okay, so again, a little bit of light learning to the middle of your day here in California and towards later afternoon on the East Coast and wherever you are. Thank you, Professor Matt, for taking us into Zohar and more importantly, getting us back out.
Yes,
we're not all just stuck in there. And I want to thank our group. Really great, thoughtful questions, comments. We can't get to everything, but I do have the chat, so I can share the chat with everybody as well. Maybe I'll do that so people can see if it was hard to note everything. It's very hard to do a class where you're concentrating on the speaker, the text. We've got the translation going on live, and then we've got people commenting. But I will say, really, really great questions, thoughtful, great group. Happy to have you with us with CSP. Looking forward to having you all back with us next week. Thank you, Professor Matt.
All the best. Shalom.
Take care, everybody. Good seeing you. See you soon. Maybe on Sunday. Don't forget we have Bert Bazanski. Take care, everybody.
Watch what eggs do to your brain. Take a look at these 2 brain scans. They both look young, strong, and healthy, but only one of them is young. The other is the brain of a 97-year-old woman. Her secret? Doing this one simple thing each night before bed. I'm not sure if this might interest you, but if you or a loved one is often forgetting things or suffering from brain fog, then I've got something important to share with you. So, about a year ago, my husband came home from his doctor's appointment, and he had this note that totally knocked me down. It said, "Your husband is showing signs of dementia. You can try to slow it down with medications, but that's really all we can do." How could this be? We had dreams of going on a cruise, traveling the world, and seeing our grandchildren graduate from college. And all of that to be taken away within the next 2 years, because the doctor said that's how long it could be before my husband would need 24/7 care, perhaps even in a nursing home. So it turned out, after a lot of tests, my husband's brain was all clogged up. It had plaques. Really scary, to be honest. And this can happen to so many of us. It was literally suffocating his brain, like his brain was all clogged up. That's why he was experiencing forgetfulness. He was tripping up on his words. Sometimes he couldn't put a complete sentence together. And the scary thing is, if you just ignore forgetfulness and brain fog and do nothing about it for too long, the damage could be irreversible and devastating. We're talking about possibly losing your independence. But the reason I'm sharing this is not to scare you, but to share what we've discovered as the way to fix this for good, without dangerous pills or anything unnatural. It brings tears to my eyes even talking about this, because we literally just stumbled upon it. Right when we got the dementia news, we saw a program on
You're still here?
about an award
Fuck!
Dr. Sam Walters, who is a former NASA scientist and a true pioneer in...
You're still here, Dr. John? Holy shit, I thought you got the message and you hung up the phone. On hold. On hold. Dr. John, I don't have any actual consultation advice for you. My advice would be, if you get the Bible, I'll listen to you read the book of Psalms, the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of John, the book of Mark, the book of Luke, the book of Revelation, if you want to read from Proverbs. I mean, let's not use your patterns here, Dr. John, because quite honestly, I mean, it's exhausting. You heard a black man say that once? Oof. What does the man... See, this is the problem. Is there's no such thing as black people. There's no such thing as white people. There's just people, People are people, and I don't care what somebody's melatonin densities has to say about it. You know what I'm saying? It's people. There are brown people, yellow people, black people, purple people, green people, blue people. Beautiful lies. Lies. These aren't lies. What are you talking about? Dr. John, I don't have time for this nonsense. I don't have time for your games as you like to play them. Let us go to the second part of this series, Shekhinah.
Which we see now as feminine because of the Kabbalah. Shekhinah in the Talmud and Midrash does not mean the feminine half of God. Shekhinah simply means God. Shekhinah means specifically how God manifests in the world. So God's presence in the world is what is meant by Shekhinah. In the Zohar, Shekhinah comes to mean the feminine half of God. But go back to your question, the Talmud does identify Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh as Shekhinah.
Ooh, dirty Jewish, man. Damn,
So
John. John, what if you're projecting? What if you're talking about yourself? How do you know? Do you really know? Everybody fucking comes from Mount Sinai. You know that, right? You know that. You're talking about yourself. You're projecting. You're talking about yourself, Dr. John.
My name could refer to Shekhinah. Whereas in the Zohar, because Shekhinah is specifically feminine, it would not usually be identified with Shekhinah. I hope that's more of an explanation than more confusion. But that's what I would say.
I think there are some comments that I think what people are referring to in their comments is Shabbat as this ultimate mystical union. Kabbalah Shabbat, lighting the candles, welcoming the bride, and all the mystical stuff that people explain about union and what's going on there, how this ties into some of what you've been teaching us.
Very much so. That's very relevant. Kabbalah Shabbat. It's interesting. It's called Kabbalah Shabbat, which means what? The Kabbalah of Shabbat. But it doesn't mean the Jewish mysticism of Shabbat. Kabbalah means welcoming. Lekabel is to receive or to welcome. So Kabbalah Shabbat means welcoming the Shabbat. Now it's interesting. Kabbalah Shabbat does have something to do with Kabbalah because Kabbalah Shabbat was invented by the Kabbalah. We do not have the full liturgy, the full prayers of Kabbalah Shabbat until we come to the Kabbalah. The Talmud does not say to begin the Shabbat with Lecha Dodi, but welcoming the bride. The Talmud does refer to Shabbat as a queen, as a bride, but you don't have the full ritual of Kabbalah Shabbat until we come to the Kabbalah. So what is Shabbat for the Kabbalah? Shabbat is the wedding.
You know, John, I'm trying to, keep it all together over here. You mind if I drink some coffee, smoke a little weed, get the fucking migraine down from all the drinking last night? Hangovers can be very dangerous. People have brain aneurysms, They say cannabis, it coats the DNA structure. Oh, shit, he's calling the cops.
God. Friday evening, we're celebrating Shekhinah. And as you say, Shekhinah is identified as the Shabbat queen, the Shabbat bride. And the union of Shekhinah with the Holy One, blessed be He, is actually hinted at. It's actually referred to in Lecha Dodi. Now, what is Lecha Dodi? I'm sure most of you know Lecha Dodi, one of the most beautiful prayers in the prayer book. That was written by a Kabbalist in Tzfat, in the city of Tzfat in the 16th century. And that is a celebration of Shekhinah, and it refers to Shekhinah and her husband. Now, who is the husband of Shekhinah? The husband of Shekhinah is Tiferet, her masculine partner, her spouse. So Kabbalah Shabbat is a wonderful example of how Kabbalah affected Judaism. Many people say, well, Kabbalah is interesting, but is it really mainstream Judaism? Okay, what could be more mainstream than Lecha Dodi? Of the Sabbath bride, the Sabbath queen. And that really is to a great extent the contribution, the gift of the Zohar and the Kabbalah.
One last comment. One of our regulars and donors noted how Shekhinah and the description of Shekhinah in the flame really puts the female once again in a place of deprivation of agency. That Shekhinah is dependent on two different elements as opposed to Tiferet, which is above it all, more powerful, I would say. And anyway, it was just an interesting note to what you taught us.
No, that's very important. It's very important to honestly say that the Zohar, the Kabbalah, is a product of the medieval mind. In some ways, it's very much, of the past. With all of the advance that is made, it is a great step forward to introduce, to recover the feminine within God, right? God is so overwhelmingly masculine, as we've said before, right? In all of Western religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, God is overwhelmingly masculine. It's hard to find descriptions of God as feminine. So it's a great breakthrough. It's a great step forward that the Zohar and the Kabbalah celebrate the feminine nature of the divine. But it is true that this is a hierarchical system. very often in many ways. And Shekhinah is beneath Tiferet. Shekhinah is seen as the throne of Tiferet. And here the white light is constant, Tiferet, where Shekhinah could be blue or black or red. The thing of her being dependent on what's beneath, though, is very interesting, because for the Zohar, God is dependent on the human being. I would say the masculine and the feminine of God are in some ways incomplete without human participation, without human action. If we don't act in the world, then God,
that's the sound of the police.
God is left not unified. God is separate.
No, I don't need to throw Dr. John out of the room. I hope he's listening and enjoying this divine wisdom, because he could go into many other rooms and listen to all types of bullshit, all types of stupid pieces of shit screaming on a Sunday morning. And he knows it. I know it. And therefore, he's choosing me. He's not choosing the room. He's choosing the content.
Male without the female.
Because the content gives him the contentment that he is looking for.
The female without the male. So both aspects of Shekhinah, the male and the female, are dependent on human action. The Kabbalistic phrase for this is Sorech Gavoa, literally the need on high. God needs us. God needs the human being. Many of you are familiar with the thought of Abraham Joshua Heschel, great teacher of the 20th century. And his most famous book is called God in Search of Man. Okay, it should be God in search of the human, I'd say. But God is searching for us. It's not just we're searching for God. God needs us.
Yeah, you see that, Dr. John? We're listening to Kabbalah here. Do not interrupt the topic.
So that radical idea you have hinted at in the Talmud, and the Midrash of the Zohar really develops it further. So I would just say, in summary, the female is still subservient to the male, according to many descriptions. But on the other hand, both male and female are in need of the human being. I would say, too, sometimes Shekhinah is called king, not just queen. Sometimes Shekhinah can be king because she rules over the world. Even though Tiferet is higher than Shekhinah in some sense, Shekhinah is in charge of the world. Shekhinah is ruling over the world.
Tulu.
Okay, let's return to
Hi, Tulu. Tulu, we are listening to something. We don't want to make your dopamine creation here. This is not the room for the doping.
So,
don't dope here. You dope. Take your dope somewhere else. Make your dope some. There you go. Bye. Exactly.
Came on page 280.
Dismissed.
Of volume 1.
Dismissed.
Come and see. The only arousal kindling this blue light.
Dr. John, you know, Dr. John, you keep telling me you need a fix, but I'm telling you, the fix is in the words. And if you want to read a book, I'll listen to you read a book, and you can get your dialectic therapy that way. But I don't want to do your dialectic therapy for you because it's not real therapy. You need to read, Dr. John. Why? For God's sakes, you're a doctor.
Is Israel cleaving below? Okay, finally, there's a reference to the Jewish people, to Israel. So the blue light we're saying is Tiferet. The blue light we're saying is Shekhinah. The only way to kindle Shekhinah, for her to be grasped by Tiferet, okay, to stimulate the divine union, how does that arousal happen? The only way is by Israel cleaving below. Israel has to yearn for God. Israel has to strive to connect with God in order for Shekhinah to unite with Tiferet. See what the note has here, very simply, 1350. Their devotion, Israel's devotion, fuels the passion of the divine couple. Okay, without holiness on the part of human beings, on the part of Israel, God remains incomplete. God remains ununified. Come and see. Although by nature this blue-black light consumes anything cleaving below, right? Shekhinah is a fire. Anything placed beneath that fire will be consumed. Even though that's so, Israel cleaves below and abides enduringly. Even though Israel cleaves to Shekhinah, they're not consumed. As is written, you cleaving to Yudevave, your God, are alive. Even though you're cleaving to God, Yudevave means Shekhinah, Even though you're cleaving to Shekhinah, you're alive. You're God, not our God, right? Moses is on a different level, but we are connected. We are close to Shekhinah. Shekhinah is accessible to us. You're God, to that blue-black light devouring, consuming whatever cleaves below. Yet you cleave and endure. As is written, alive, every one of you today. Even though the fire consumed, somehow Israel is able to experience devekut, right? The Hebrew word here is devekut, cleaving. That's the word in the verse from Deuteronomy, Va'atem hadevekim, you who cleave to God. So Israel can cleave to God and yet remain alive. That's the wonder. That's how we can reconcile these two verses. We should cleave to God. Even though Shekhinah is a fire, we're able to withstand that. Above the white light hovers a concealed light encompassing it. This is the allusion to Bina. Okay, so Malchut Shekhinah is the blue light, Tiferet is the white light. Higher than Tiferet is Bina, doesn't even name a color here, but Bina is a more concealed, hidden realm, okay, the Divine Mother. Above the white light hovers a concealed light encompassing it. Here abides supernal mystery. You will discover all in the ascending flame, wisdoms of the highest. If you meditate on a candle, if you penetrate the outer surface meaning of those colors, you can imagine divine qualities. You can discover everything by gazing at a candle. Out of the note 1352, I bring something here from a famous scientist. 1352, you will discover all in the ascending flame. See the remark of the 19th century physicist Michael Faraday at the beginning of his Chemical History of a Candle. Okay, this is a little booklet that Michael Faraday wrote, Chemical History of a Candle. Look what he says. There is not a law under which any part of this universe is governed, which does not come into play and is touched upon in these phenomena. Okay, that may sound hard to understand, but now it becomes clear. There is no more open door by which you can enter into the study of natural philosophy than by considering the physical phenomena of a candle. What Faraday does in these talks, Chemical History of a Candle, is really talks he gave for children or for adolescents in the 19th century. He said you can find out everything you need to know about natural philosophy, really means science. You can find out everything you need to know about chemistry by looking at a candle and seeing how it consumes and how it feeds on physical substance. Faraday goes through that in a very different way than we've seen the Zohar do. But look what they share. Both of them say you can understand everything by looking at a candle. All of science or all of mysticism, you can understand the deepest secrets of nature, of being, of reality, if you meditate on a candle. It's beautiful there to see science and religion harmonizing in a certain way. So Rabbi Shimon has taught all of this. We're just going to read the next two lines in conclusion. Rabbi Pinchas approached and kissed him. Rabbi Pinchas kissed Rabbi Shimon, saying, "Blessed be the compassionate one who we happen to meet here. So glad I ran into you, because look at the Torah that I have learned." Okay, let's stop the share and let's discuss this a little more. And I'd encourage people to ask questions either about this specifically, let's give that a few minutes, but then just more generally cover.
Okay, I'm going to quickly read from the Zohar. This is 3 minutes of Doibra. I'm going to create some 60-second clips on YouTube. This isn't exactly Zohar, but this is the commentary and the notes. Here we go. Moses and the blazing bush, Midrash Hanilam, Na'ilam, one who comes close to fire is burned. Is it possible to cleave to Shekhinah? It is not written, for Yahweh, your God, is a consuming fire. The dense cloud, The mountain was ablaze with flames to the heart of heaven, dark with densest clouds. The angel of Yahweh, Shekinah, who is given this name because she transmits the power and blessing of the Sephirot. Zohar Shemot Rabbah. In the light of the wisdom in relation to the Sephirot. Why is it written? The literal sense of the verse is too mundane to satisfy Rabbi Abba's mystical yearning. The water must mean more than the Nile River from which Moses was drawn by Pharaoh's daughter. It is really a symbol of chesed, the free-flowing love of God. This was Moses' source, so he could confront fire, which in Rabbi Abba's view refers to Gevura, the power of God. Moses was able to harmonize the two polarities. He attained the rung of Tiferet, beauty, the central Sephirah. The place Moses was hewn, normally according to the Midrash Ha-Ni'alam, human souls are hewn from the throne of glory. Shekhinah, see above, Abram, the soul breath. Moses had a higher source. Cordovero, Hamma, suggests Hukmah, which stands above Chesed. Arrayed in all 10 spheres, Moses' perfection is symbolized by his intimate relation with Shekinah and his attainment of Tiferet. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, he was invested with all 10 Sephirot. He had full awareness of God and displayed all the divine qualities. Not just a loyal member of my household, as the phrase could be understood. This was Moses' source. Not just a loyal member of my household, as the phrase could be understood. The King James Version, who is faithful in all mine house, happy is the share. Happy is the mortal human who is given such a promise. Anytime he wanted to, he could converse with him. Who was that? Balaam. Balaam was the soothsayer from Aram, invited by King Balak of Moab to curse the people of Israel before they entered the promised land. The Midrash compares him to Moses. God raised up Moses for Israel and Balaam for the nations of the world. The Midrash quoted here from Sifrei, Deuteronomy, is more striking. Balaam was as great as Moses. The rabbis are perplexed and have to wait for the master, Rabbi Shimon, to offer the true mystical explanation of this bizarre Midrash. Black resin mixed with finest balsam. How could Balaam possibly be associated with Moses?
Not just this isn't Torah. Anything that comes to mind, either in the chat or if you're adventurous, you could raise your hand and we may be able to call on you.
So Howard has something to say. Howard says, in talking about Israel and cleaving to the light that consumes everything. So that's a very dangerous place to be, isn't it? I'm kind of paraphrasing. And the way we can protect ourselves, according to Howard, would be, well, we do the mitzvot and we adhere to the principles of faith, and that protects us and allows us to come close to this flame. But that does not imply great risk. In other words, can't this lead to self-destruction because we're so close to this powerful force? If we don't follow the mitzvot and don't do things right, this Dvekut will lead to destruction.
Yeah. What about the danger of Dvekut? I mean, the Zohar begins like the Talmud by almost saying, how can you possibly cleave to Shekinah? And then it says, no, Israel is somehow able to. So you're right. There's something dangerous about this this contact with the divine. In general, it would not be seen as something possible or not possible frequently, not possible for normal people, but only the great pious saint might be able to cultivate an intimacy with Shekinah. How could simple, everyday people even imagine that they could come out unscathed? So that's certainly here in the background. There's something dangerous about the contact with fire. God is fire. You're right that mitzvot are the key here. I would say mitzvot are protection, but mitzvot are also the way that you approach it all. Okay, by performing a mitzvah, you're somehow you're putting yourself in relationship with the divine. You're letting God guide you. You're letting God inspire you, and that could lead to very beautiful ethical perfection. It could motivate you to become just and loving and compassionate, but it could also be dangerous. So what's the danger here about mysticism? What's the danger involved with contact with the divine? We've all heard, I think, probably all heard, you shouldn't study Kabbalah until you've reached a certain age or until you've mastered certain fields. What were the Kabbalists scared about? What were the rabbis scared about? What's dangerous about trying to become intimate with God? I think we've talked about this before, but it's very important, so it's certainly worth exploring a little bit again. I think really there's a social danger and a psychological danger. The psychological danger is that you're looking so deeply into yourself. This is somewhat similar to psychoanalysis. But if you look so deeply into yourself, what are you going to uncover? We're told we should explore our fears, we should explore our desires. But what happens if you uncover some deep, dark secret, some terror that you experience? Is that going to be helpful or is it going to be destructive? So with the proper guidance, with the proper preparation, certainly that would be healing. Ideally, it would be healing to work through one's own dark places. But we could easily see how that's dangerous. It's dangerous to uncover too much. And the mystic is really doing something similar. The mystical search is not so much jumping up to heaven, it's really going deep within your soul, deep within your heart. So there's something powerful about that journey. There's something vital about that journey, but there is a danger there. So there's a fine line, I think, between mysticism and madness, right? It was often said, don't study the Kabbalah because you'll go crazy. That's what you hear on the popular version of, don't study Kabbalah because, and one of the conclusions of that sentence is because you could go mad. If you look so deeply into yourself, if you uncover all your secrets, will you be able to bear that? So there's a psychological danger in spiritual search. There's also a social danger, and here it's really a matter of who has the authority. Who has the authority in the Jewish world to tell you how to act? Should you follow the tradition? Should you follow the halacha? Should you follow the rabbi? Or should you follow your own inner spiritual yearning? So that is seen as dangerous too. If you have your own connection to God, if you can cultivate your own relationship with God, then you might question the Torah. You might question the rabbi. You might say, I don't need another guide. I can guide myself. And we all know the danger of that.
Okay, this is part 2. Here we go. Black resin mixed with finest balsam. How could Balaam possibly be associated with Moses? 13 rivers of balsam await the righteous in the world that is coming, according to the Talmud. Ta'anit, Jerusalem Talmud, Avodah Zarah, Bereshit Rabbah. In the Zohar, the rivers of balsam are the fragrant flow of emanation from Binah, the divine mother to Shekhinah, her daughter. See Zohar 3:1818. Moses, arrayed in all the Sephirot, bathes in these rivers. Black resin is the ultimate impurity. The Aramaic phrase kotifa de karnetai is characteristic of the Zohar style. Kotifa is a variation on kitaf, which means resin from balsam tree. Karnetai is a neologism, its meaning unknown. Zohar in Spanish, carantona, ugly, false face. The phrase has been interpreted variously to mean a chamber pot, cordovero or hamak. Cedar resin, vital, Derek Emmett. Bunch resin, dark and black, galante or hama. One must invent new words to adequately describe the gross impurity of Balaam. Moses worked wonders, Balaam worked black magic. Aramaic ishtamash means made use of, but it is also a technical term for theurgic practice. See Mishnah Avot. Hillel said, one who makes theurgic use De Ishtamash of the crown, the name Yahweh has no share in the world that is coming. Above the hidden light. Moses worked wonders with the Holy Crown. Because of his status in the Sephirot, he was able to use the name Yahweh to work wonders for Israel. Balaam's powers of magic. Balaam's powers of magic also derive from crowns, but not holy crowns. The lower or nethermost crowns are the demonic powers located outside the realm of the Sephirot in the corresponding names. The potency derives from the fact that they are fed from the drippings of the juice of Shekinah. See Zohar 3209b. This accords with Rabbi Shimon's first image. Balaam is black resin from the balsam tree. Moses is pure essence of balsam. If you think he was any higher, go ask his ass. Balaam's ass makes a fool of him on the way to see Balak, king of Moab. She sees the angel of Yahweh, while he, the great sorcerer, sees nothing. See Numbers 22, 21, 35, Zohar 329b. On one level, Rabbi Shimon's closing words are a mocking reference to this episode, but they also allude to Balaam's method of attaining prophetic powers.
Balaam's powers. People who say, God told me to do this. Right? We know murderers and horrible, evil people who have claimed that they're fulfilling the will of God. So the danger, the social danger and the psychological danger of intimacy with the divine is obvious. And the Kabbalah is aware of that. And here the Kabbalah is wrestling with that. The Talmud said, don't even try. Don't try to connect directly with God. How can you proceed? Imitate God. God is kind, you should be kind. That's really that's the message here. So the danger is real, but I think what the Zohar has to offer, what the Kabbalah has to offer, is so valuable that I think it's worth proceeding, but to proceed with caution. So how do you delve into mysticism and protect yourself? Here it's also a matter of Torah and mitzvot, having some structure, having some code, having some guardrails, having a banister. You're climbing the stairway to heaven. You have to have a banister. So what is the banister? The banister is friends. The banister is a teacher. The banister is keeping yourself grounded. The banister is being in relationship. The banister is feeling responsibility for your spouse, for your children, to think of the other. The great Jewish philosopher Levinas says that's really the key to all of Judaism, is the idea of the other. Don't focus just on my own thrill, my own excitement, my own passion, not even my own holiness. Don't just focus on your own holiness. Focus on your relationship with the other.
We have some hands up before we get there. Stefan asks, is unification in Kabbalah actually to be achieved one day? Is that the Messianic age, or is it never to be achieved?
The unification, I think, is something that comes and goes. I think there are moments of wholeness, there are moments of perfection, there are moments of attainment, and then you could say Messiah is seen as, Yom Shekulo Shabbat, the total Sabbath. Right now we have Shabbat one day a week. When Mashiach comes, it will be full-time Shabbat, 24/7. So full unification you might see as something messianic, but getting a taste of the oneness is something we can do now through meditation, through prayer, through acting in holy ways. You get a taste of that oneness, both on a personal level and imagining God's becoming whole, God's becoming one, which, as we said, is dependent on how we act.
So we have Shira and Harvey had a question, so we'll ask to unmute and see what question they have.
Great.
Yes, Shabbat Shalom. There's a question of cleaving, and from what aspect in myself does that cleaving issue? Is it an active cleaving, reaching out to grasp hold of, or is it a passive cleaving, opening myself with an inner attention to holiness? How is that cleaving best activated?
Yeah, it's a great question. That word davak, it's just the Hebrew davak, it sounds very active and forceful and powerful. And the English, to cling or to cleave, sounds like something that you need to do actively, not just to sit there and wait for it to happen. But what you say about being receptive, being open, is vital here. I think there's an active and a passive quality to this experience of Dvekut. It sounds active, but you really have to let go.
Not just a loyal member of my household, as the phrase could be understood. The King James Version, who is faithful in all mine house, happy is the share. Happy is the mortal human who was given such a promise. Anytime he wanted to, he could converse with him. Who was that? Balaam. Balaam was the soothsayer from Aram, invited by King Balak of Moab to curse the people of Israel before they entered the promised land. The Midrash compares him to Moses. God raised up Moses for Israel and Balaam for the nations of the world. The Midrash quoted here from Sifrei, Deuteronomy, is more striking. Balaam was as great as Moses. The rabbis are perplexed and have to wait for the master, Rabbi Shimon, to offer the true mystical explanation of this bizarre midrash. Black resin mixed with finest balsam. How could Balaam possibly be associated? Not just a loyal member of my household, as the phrase could be understood. The King James Version. Why do you think I explained Kabbalah very badly? I'm bidding this up, meaning that I'm studying here. It's not like I'm trying to explain it. I'm doing individual, little 1-minute clips here. The point is to just keep my brain working, keep saying words and reading and doing this chanting. It's more like therapeutic. And I'm putting these on YouTube, and these videos just got like hundreds of views, which is amazing. If you create good content, which is really just basically like, clear English, they seem to like it. So we're going to create 3 more here, and we're going to keep going, because this chick that I was supposed to go meet up with for a date, everybody's so fucking stupid. It's like, to do all this talking, and then before you go meet, it's like, oh, I have to cancel, by the way. It's like, holy shit. Like, I think people just cancel intentionally because they get a kick out of it, like making all these plans and then canceling last minute. It's like such a rush to like shit on somebody, if that makes any sense.
For it to happen, you have to open yourself. You have to be receptive. You have to open your heart. So I think there's a preparation of openness, of letting go, and then something comes to you, or you are empowered. You're empowered and able to act in a mindful way. Really, when we're talking about mysticism and spirituality, I think awareness is perhaps the most important element. So there's an active stance, an active role that you can fulfill or strive to fulfill. And there's an openness and awareness that will allow for the connection.
Great question. Cheryl has a question. So Cheryl, I'm muting you.
Hey, Danny. Am I unmuted? I guess I'm muted. In the Zohar, it seems that most of it has a lot to do with both the feminine and the masculine side and joining. But then you leave the Zohar and you get into rabbinical Judaism, Messianic Judaism, and there isn't very much about the feminine side of things, or the role of women in Judaism so much. It's very much a patriarchal, masculine push through of everything. How is that one of the reasons that maybe the Zohar is not terribly popular in mainstream Judaism?
It's such an interesting phrase, mainstream Judaism, and I mentioned it before myself. We're talking about Shabbat and Kabbalat Shabbat, right? It's interesting. Arthur Green, I'm sure many of you know of his name and his work. He looked into this, and it's interesting. The first time you ever have that phrase, mainstream Judaism, it's in a German book in the 19th century, and that book is an attack on what? On Kabbalah. In other words, mainstream Judaism is trying to exclude what might be uncomfortable, might be challenging to the normal presentation of Judaism. So I think there is a tension between what the Kabbalah suggests and the picture you would find if you open a typical page of the Bible, a typical page of the Talmud. As we've said, you don't find God described in feminine ways in many Jewish texts, and that's one of the most radical differences between the Zohar and the Talmud or the Bible. So I would say that is one of the great contributions of the Kabbalah, to insist that God is equally male and female. Ultimately, God is beyond all gender. Okay, Ein Sof is not male or female. The infinite is beyond gender. But if we're going to talk about God, God has been talked about for so long in purely masculine terms. I think it's important to balance the masculine with the feminine. And that's the great contribution of the Zohar. I would say that in the last, 30 years, that critique of Judaism has become very widespread. And I'm sure you're aware, maybe more aware than I am, of Jewish feminism and Jewish feminists, and how Judaism has changed over the past few decades. And I think one of the most important changes is to criticize the purely masculine description of God. So I think the Zohar is valuable in that sense, to look at a holy text of Judaism, to look at one of the holiest texts of Judaism does celebrate the feminine within God. I'm not saying that people have to follow the Zohar. Much of the Zohar is very difficult and challenging, but the great gift of the Zohar is that here is someone 700 years ago. All right, the Zohar was composed in Spain, was largely composed in Spain in the 13th century. So here's a book written 700 years ago that gives equal weight to the feminine. I would say that there's more about Shekhinah in the Zohar than you would find it in any other Jewish text. And that's something, that revolution is still going on. People might say we've made a lot of progress. People would say we've made hardly any progress, but things are changing. Things have changed. And that, to my mind, is one of the great gifts of the mystical tradition.
So last few things before we call the session. Rob wants to know about he wants to know what's the point about above the white light hovers a concealed light encompassing it. It seems like almost an unnecessary addition to the discussion we had. We focused on the two lights. They were the main lights, and all of a sudden you have this reference. Doesn't really go anywhere. So,
that's very interesting. I'm really glad you raised that. It's really typical of the Zohar. Zohar proceeds, it begins with this very difficult imagery, and remember, it doesn't name Shekhinah, it doesn't name Tiferet. Finally, after we've worked through a couple pages of that, okay, now I finally get it. The blue light is Shekhinah. Right, with my notes and my explanation, now I understand the blue light is Shekhinah, the white light is Tiferet. We finally got it. And this is typical of the Zohar. You think you got it? Well, there's another level. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to say much about it, but you should know there's something more. So I think it's kind of saying, don't think that you have the whole package. There's something further to explore. There's something yet to be discovered, and it leaves you hanging. You could like that or dislike that, but it's very characteristic of the Zohar not to end the passage where it's finally all clear and figured out. There's still something mysterious. In fact, I think it's even, let me just pull it up one more second. It's even worded that way, right? Above the white light hovers a concealed light encompassing it. Here abides supernal mystery. Okay, so there's still mystery. Even though it's now been explained, there's still mystery. You will discover all. Go back to the candle. Go back, light the candle, start again, see where it leads you. But leaving open that, giving us that sense of we're only beginning the journey. We haven't completed the journey.
And then, are there any other meditation-like techniques that are in Zohar that we can look forward to learning about?
There are, a good number of meditative techniques. The fullest description of them is in a book by R.E.A. Kaplan, Kaplan, Meditation and Kabbalah. He has a more popular book just called Jewish Meditation, but Meditation and Kabbalah draws on dozens or more techniques from Zohar and other books of Kabbalah. Many of them have to do with the letters of the divine name or different divine names. Ayin, focusing on no-thingness. We've discovered that we've explored that theme of Aleph Yud Nun, of nothingness, meditating on Ayin, trying to melt into the oneness or the no-thingness. But there are not many in the Zohar itself, and I suggest you look at Kaplan for that.
So thank you so much. We were talking before the program, your new book about your final proofing of your new book about becoming Elijah, being published by Yale University Press in the spring. So we're looking forward to that coming out, maybe having you back for a series about Elijah. And on behalf of CSB, I want to thank you for taking us to places we ordinarily probably wouldn't go or shouldn't go by ourselves. I know some of you do, and I know that I'll mention that Professor Matt has an ongoing class. When you do your class, like how often do you meet? Like what is
it's once a week, basically. We're going to start again in October.
How long?
The course in English is Tuesday evening.
And how long does it last?
It's about...
Yo, Holla, the point is I'm killing multiple birds with one stone here, unlike other people on this app. So, I don't know what to tell you. Like, do I have to defend everything? Because, I do.
An hour and a half. I teach for an hour in that discussion. We have we have 6 weekly meetings. Then we take a break for a couple weeks and do another series of 6, and it's ongoing in that way. People can begin at the beginning with the recording, or they can jump in with the current session. They can see the description that you'll send out, and people can contact me.
This is what happens to your body when you eat cheese. Watch this before eating cheese.
Number 1 on the Torah. So we're looking at volume 3 of the Zohar Pritzker edition, because this Joseph story is further on in the book of Genesis. The first 3 volumes of the Zohar Pritzker edition cover Genesis. The next 3 volumes cover Exodus, and volumes 7 through 9 cover the rest of the Torah, Leviticus through Deuteronomy. So we're in volume 3 of the Zohar Pritzker edition. This is the Zohar's commentary on the story of Joseph. Just to help you navigate the page, the top it says the Zohar. Over here is the original Aramaic pagination, but we're working with English page numbers, with Arabic page numbers here, page 114 in volume 3. Anything in italics is a quote from the Bible. Okay, all biblical verses are put in italics here. You can immediately see when a verse is being quoted. The top part of the page is the Zohar. The bottom part of the page is my commentary. Sometimes, as you see, there's more commentary than Zohar, but that's because the Zohar is so dense. We're going to begin reading the text and then move down to the commentary. So let me just enlarge this a little so that people can see the text more clearly. Okay, this is the text of the Zohar. It begins, Joseph dreamed a dream, from Genesis chapter 37. And let me read to you a few verses.
Okay, here we go. Here's more. If you think he was any higher, go ask his ass. Balaam's ass makes a fool of him on the way to see Balak, king of Moab. She sees the angel of Yahweh, while he, the great sorcerer, sees nothing. See Numbers 22, 21 through 35. Zohar 329b. On one level, Rabbi Shimon's closing words are a mocking reference to this episode but they also allude to Balaam's method of attaining prophetic powers. According to the Zohar, Balaam was able to draw down upon himself the impure spirit by having sexual relations with his ass. See Zohar 1125b 3207a Shekel HaKodesh, Talmud Sanhedrin 105b, kissed his hands. As a sign of veneration and thanks, this is a frequent custom among the Havraya, the comrades of the Zohar. Above colors and enlightenment, mana and wisdom, the golden calf, the wedding celebration, Talmud Berachot Bereshit Rabba Bacher, Reg 22. The covering in my heart had disappeared. Aramaic Hamida de Libai Nefak Leva. The Aramaic root himd means to desire, covet. The sentence may mean the yearning in my heart to know the true meaning of this midrash has been satisfied. The translation in the text conveys the role played by Kabbalah in Spain, reassuring the Jews that although the Christians were politically, economically, and socially in power, the Jews were God's chosen people and thus ultimately higher. See above introduction. Rabbi Shimon's midrash on the midrash has just this effect on Rabbi Yosef, and he responds by thanking the master for helping him see the true state of affairs. Zohar 3119b 221b. He no longer has a desire to covet the power and position of the Gentiles, for Israel is high and the idolaters are low. Idolaters' position of the Gentiles, for Israel is high and the idolaters are low, is idolaters. Idolaters refers to Spanish Christians. Balaam is the archetype of the non-Jewish prophet and may stand for Jesus, claimed to be the successor to Moses, but here unmasked as a sorcerer. See, however, Ginsburg, Legends, who rejects this interpretation in regard to rabbinic literature. Urbach Tarbitz, 1956. In another passage read by Shimon, declares, I am a servant of the Blessed Holy One. I do not rely upon a son of divinity, but rather on the God of heaven. See above introduction. There is no need to covet Christian theology, as the closing lines of this passage indicate. The Jews are God's children and have a direct line themselves. Moses was one of a kind. On the special quality of Moses' prophecy, see Vayikra, Rabbah 114, Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed. Moses was worried, Shema Rabbah, his children, literally sons.
So that we'll get the biblical context. The Zohar, after all, is a commentary on the Torah. It's not a systematic book of mysticism. It moves through the Torah verse by verse, chapter by chapter. And it's important to have a Bible in front of you when you're studying the Zohar so you can see what the Zohar is drawing on. So I'm going to read from chapter 37, beginning verse 5. Joseph is a son of Jacob, but Joseph's brothers resent him because Jacob favors Joseph more than any of his other children. For example, Jacob makes for Joseph the coat of many colors, some special ornamented tunic that Joseph has, and his brothers are very jealous. But the brothers are even more spiteful toward Joseph because of this dream that Joseph has. This is chapter 37 of Genesis, verse 5. I'm reading from Robert Alter's translation of the Bible, which I highly recommend. It's the best translation there is of the Bible in English, just called the Hebrew Bible, 3 volumes. I'm reading from volume 1, which is the Torah. Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said to them, listen, please, to this dream that I have dreamed. Look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and look, my sheaf arose and actually stood up, and look, your sheaves drew round and bowed to my sheaf. That's his dream. He dreams that they're all in the field, they're binding the sheaves of wheat. Joseph's sheaf stands up tall, and all of the brothers' sheaves bow down to Joseph's sheaf. With the letters of the divine name, the brothers his brother said to him, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule us?" And they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Okay, that's enough of the biblical text to get us going. So how does the Zohar continue? Rabbi Chia opened. Okay, this is one of the scholars of the Zohar, one of the companions of Rabbi Shimon, the hero of the Zohar. He's going to interpret this verse in Genesis, but the way you interpret a verse in Jewish tradition is by quoting another verse. So Rabbi Chia quotes another verse that mentions the word dream from the book of Numbers. Rabbi Chia opened, he said, "Hear my words. If there be among you a prophet of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, in a vision I make myself known to him. In a dream I speak with him." So this is the book of Numbers, where actually God is comparing Moses to all the other prophets. He's contrasting all other prophets to whom God might appear in a vision or in a dream, whereas to Moses God appears directly. But the reason this is important here, and the reason Rabbi Chia quotes the verse, is because it seems to be saying prophecy can come through a dream. So there's some connection, there's some relation between prophecy and dream. "Come and see how many rungs upon rungs the Blessed Holy One has made, all standing one atop the other, rung upon rung, this above that, all absorbing suitably, these on the right, those on the left, each appointed over another, all fittingly." Okay, what are these rungs? First of all, notice the Zohar says, "Come and see." It's the favorite formula of the Zohar. Let's look more deeply into this. Let's see what else is going on beneath the surface layer of the text of the Bible. So rungs upon rungs. He's really talking here about those 10 Sefirot, those qualities of God, which are seen as rungs upon a ladder. The Zohar never uses the word Sefirot. I don't think once in the whole Zohar, if certainly fewer than a few times. Whenever the Zohar wants to refer to Sefirot, it uses various images, various metaphors. One of its favorite is rungs. So when the Zohar says rung, it often means Sephirah. Not always, but usually. Take a look down at the note here. You'll see, we're not going to look at all the notes, but I want to show you how to use these notes. This is note 189, so down below here on the left, rungs upon rungs within the network of Sefirot. And throughout the entire chain of being, lower rungs absorb the flow of emanation from the higher. So this includes the Sefirot, and then continuing the chain of being all the way to the earthly realm. Right and left, why does the Zohar mention right and left? Because he's alluding here to Chesed and Din, right? Those two polar opposite Sefirot, on the right Chesed, on the left Din, judgment. The two poles of divine being, whose opposite qualities color the world. Okay, back to the Zohar. Come and see. All prophets of the world absorb from a single facet through two known rungs. Okay, what is he saying here? Let's take a look down at note 190. All prophets of the world absorb. Prophecy derives from the divine flow, channeled through the Sephirotic pair, Netzach and Hod, which are considered a single field of prophetic vision. And let's look back at that diagram of the Sefirot. So he's saying prophets draw from Netzach and Hod, those two rungs, through a single field. This may mean that single field of prophecy. It may mean through Malchut, through Shekhinah. Prophet absorbs the inspiration from these two Sefirot, but conveyed through Shekhinah. Okay, continuing the text, those rungs. Those rungs appeared through a dim glass, as is written, B'mar'ah, in a vision, I make myself known to him. Right, the verse from Numbers that he quoted up here, he's just bringing part of that verse again. Who is Mar'ah? As has been said, a mirror in which all colors appear. This is the dim glass. Okay, this may seem very hard to follow, and It's intentionally so. The Zohar is a cryptic text. The Zohar does not come out and say what it means. It uses poetry, it uses imagery, it uses allusions and illusions. Everything is a secret that needs to be unpacked. That's why there's so many notes here. Let's look a few of these notes. Through a dim glass. This is Shekhinah. Shekhinah is known as the mirror that does not shine, or the dim glass. Take a look down at note 191. This is a little technical for us here, but just look at this quote from the Talmud. All the prophets gaze through a dim glass, literally an ispaklaria that does not shine. Again, that's the Aramaic word, ispaklaria. It's really based on the Latin speculum. Okay, speculum can mean a mirror, right? So the ispaklaria means a glass, a mirror, a lens that does not shine. I translated it a dim glass, but it literally is the mirror that does not shine, the lens that does not shine. And what does it say in the Talmud? All the prophets gaze through a dim glass, through ispaklaria that does not shine, whereas Moses, our teacher, gazed through a clear glass, an ispaklaria that shines. So this phrase is used in the Talmud to speak about prophecy. Prophets see somehow not with total clarity. Moses saw more clearly. The prophets see through a dim glass, through an ispaklaria that doesn't convey all the image perfectly. Okay, in the Zohar, Shekhinah is the dim glass, the speculum that does not shine on its own. I'm just reading the note here, but rather reflects and transmits the other sirut. Here, she is the medium through which the prophet perceives his serotic vision. Okay, so that's what he means here. All prophets of the world absorb through a single facet, through two known rungs. There's two sfirot. Those rungs appear through Shekhinah, the mirror that does not shine, as is written, B'mar'ah, in a vision. But that word mar'ah can also mean mirror. So he's interpreting the verse in the book of Numbers that God appears in a vision to mean God appears in a mirror, specifically in the mirror in which all colors appear. We said Shekhinah is the mirror that does not shine, but on the more positive side, she reflects all of the colors of the sfirot. She doesn't reflect her own light. In that sense, she does not shine, but she conveys the light of all the sfirot. And here she conveys the prophetic image, the prophetic vision.
Okay, here's a little more. Moses and his father-in-law. Moses returned to Yahweh. Moses' first attempt at convincing Pharaoh to let the people go was a failure. Not only did Pharaoh refuse, he punished the Israelites with harsh labor as a result of Moses' demand. The people themselves were angry with Moses. Frustrated, he addressed God in bold terms. Adonai Elohim, my Lord God. Both these words are names of Shekhinah. The feminine divine presence, Yahweh, refers to Tiferet, a higher Sephirah. In rabbinic literature, a distinction is made between Elohim and Yahweh, the former indicating the divine attribute of judgment, the latter the attribute of compassion. See Sephirah, Deuteronomy. In the Zohar, Shekhinah, Elohim, executes judgment, and Tiferet is called compassion. The various divine names appearing in these verses stimulate Rabbi Yosef to weave a mystical midrash. Husband of Elohim, literally the man of Elohim, Deuteronomy 33:1. Moses. Husband of Elohim, literally the man of Elohim, Deuteronomy 33:1, which for the Zohar means the husband of Shekhinah Elohim. See above, the birth of Moses. Note on Shekhinah joined with him constantly. Moses is on such intimate terms with Shekhinah that he is called her husband. Therefore, he is allowed to speak to her as he wishes. It is instructive to compare this passage with a midrash on these verses. Shemot Rabbah 6:1. Rabbi Shimon, son of Yohai, said, Why did he, Moses, criticize the ways of the Blessed Holy One? As a result, the attribute of judgment sought to harm Moses, as it is written, Elohim spoke to Moses. However, since the Blessed Holy One saw that he had spoken up because of the suffering of Israel, he continued to deal with him through the attribute of compassion, as it is written, he said to him, I am Yahweh. The Zohar passage is obviously built on the Midrash. Following its example, Rabbi Yosei divides Exodus 6:2 into two sentences with two different subjects. Elohim spoke, he Yahweh said. Here the similarity ends, however. According to Rabbi Yosei, Moses is forgiven not because he was standing up for Israel, but because he is a member of the divine family, the husband of Elohim. Do you not know that I am king? The man's wife is the daughter of the king. Rabbi Yosei does not spell this out, but it is clear from the context and the second parable below. This cryptic style is characteristic of the Zohar. The reader is puzzled and forced to search the text to involve himself. As if it were possible, a common rabbinic expression used to tone down radically anthropomorphic statements. He said, Adonai, Moses addresses Shekhinah. Elohim spoke to Moses. Shekhinah begins to answer. The Midrash quoted above. The attribute of judgment sought to harm Moses, as it is written, Elohim spoke to Moses.
From above, from Netzach and Hod to the human prophets below. Let's continue with the Zohar. In a dream, I speak with him. That's how God said in the book of Numbers. God conveys prophecy often in a dream. But the Zohar says here, 1/60th of prophecy as has been established. What does that mean? As has been established, it often means as the rabbis taught in the Talmud. You can take a look down here at 193, 1/60th of prophecy. According to the Talmud, BT is Babylonian Talmud. The very first volume of the Talmud is Barachot, blessings. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. So that's not invented by the Zohar. The Zohar just borrowing it from the Talmud. That's why the Zohar says, as has been established in the Talmud. So why 1/60th? Because the Babylonian Talmud uses the number system current in Babylon, which was base 60, and it's almost like, really like we would say 1%. Babylonian mathematics is 1/60. We would say 1%. Of course, we still use the base 60 for hours, 60 minutes an hour for measuring angles, for GPS, but we can translate this to 1%. A dream is one fraction of prophecy. So what does that mean? If you have a dream, something is coming to you, but it's 1/60th of a prophetic vision. It's not totally clear, totally full. Maybe it's not totally accurate. It's just a taste, a fraction of prophecy. So that's from the Talmud, basically, but now the Zohar adds a new element. It is the sixth rung from that rung of prophecy, rung of Gabriel, pointed over dreams, as already explained. But the Zohar likes to do that. It says something totally unexplained, unclear, and it says, as has been explained, as if, this has already been talked about. This is basic, but to us it seems totally confusing. So what does this mean, the sixth rung from prophecy? Let's take a look here at the diagram. The sixth rung from prophecy, Netzach was the beginning of prophecy. That would be 1. Hod is 2. Yesod is 3. Malchut is 4. What comes beneath Malchut? The angels. Michael, Gabriel. So Gabriel, who's appointed over dreams, is 6 steps away from the beginning of prophecy. Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut is 4. Michael, the archangel. Michael, Gabriel, the archangel. Gabriel. The Zohar is